We're now moving on to working with the back piece of our fabric. So what we really want to point out is along the side here, we have numbers 6 through 16. Whatever size pattern you have cut out, you need to mark the corresponding dot on your fabric. This dot represents an end point. This is where you need to stop sewing, and then this will be a kind of open part with a button up the top. So you need to make sure that you stop sewing at the appropriate number here. Also, down the bottom here, you need to pop the corresponding dot as well, because this is going to again show us where we stop sewing, and then this part of our fabric will actually be open. It will be a little slit on the side of our shirt. So make sure that you do that before we take the pattern off and start working with the back. Now, just like we did with the front of our shirt, we are going to stay stitch both of the necklines for the back. Okay, so we're just going to get onto the machine, and at 1 centimeter, at 1 centimeter, we're just going to do a straight stitch around the top of both pieces. So once we've done a stay stitch on the top neckline of our back pieces, we are going to pin with our good sides together. We are going to pin this back seam together. Now we want to make sure that the dots, or the spot that we marked from the pattern, so this dot here, which is our end point, we want to make sure that we are clearly pinning that. So I'm going to do a horizontal pin so that I can clearly see that that is where I need to stop. You need to pin the whole back piece in place.
Yep.
So once you've pinned that in place, you now need to move to the sewing machine and do a straight stitch at 1.5 centimeters. Now I've started at the top point where the dot was that we marked from the pattern, and I'm going to move my way down, but it doesn't matter either way, just as long as you do not sew all the way to the top. So this is the bottom piece of our interfacing, and so just like we did with the first part, we need to hem this slightly. So we're going to fold it up about 1 centimeter all the way along this curve, and we're going to do a straight stitch before we move on and can attach it to the back of our shirt.
So just like we did for the front piece interfacing, we now again need to match up our back pieces right sides together, making sure that the shoulders, the armhole and the neckline are all lining up. And just like we did with our front piece, we're going to pin across the shoulder pieces. The only difference this time is, because we've got a center seam in our back pieces, you'll notice that the back interfacing here is actually longer than where we've sewn to. So when we're attaching our interfacing onto here, we're just going to pin it in. So line this edge up here and down until the notch, all right, as best as we can. This part won't end up being attached. So I'm just going to put a couple of pins in now to hold that in place.
So now we're going to move on to doing the center back, the neck and the armholes. So making sure that you're pinning it in place and lining it up as best you can. Now that we have this all pinned in place, it's really important when it gets to doing the center back that you take as much time as you can. So ideally, we want to be able to stitch our interfacing down to this point, which matches up with the back of our fabric, so down to here. So this will be excess and left over. However, if you can see, it's quite messy in there, okay? So just make sure you take your time to try and get it as neat as possible. So we're going to stitch the armholes, the neck, and down the center back using a 1.5 centimeter seam allowance.